For the latest top tips, reviews and advice, please subscribe below.
Hello and welcome to Attwoolls Outdoors with me, Mike. Telling you guys a bit of a tutorial video about how to change or fix an inflatable tube on an inflatable tent or also an awning or driveway. So the method I'm going to show you in this video is pretty much it works for any inflatable product pretty much, as long as the actual bladder is removable. You want this? There you go. Essentially, really kind of the inflatable tubes are really just a sleeve that sits inside the tent, then an outer chamber and an inner sort of bladder. So the inner bladder is normally just kind of clear. The joys of the whole process is actually you can unzip down to the main core, replace the sort of actual bladder itself like a bike tire, or just patch it up. So what we'll do is just go through the video and talk about every single point, and also little tricks, also how you can rectify yourself if you haven't got a spare inner tube as such. Most manufacturers will sell or supply a spare inner tube or some sort of repair kit, so if you're caught short away, you can easily get to it, no problem. One thing you do as well is never a bad thing to have a spare tube just as a backup, like you would with a spare tyre on a car or spare bike tyre when you're away. So it just means it's better to have and not need than need and not have. Generally, the bladders, like I said, are over time potentially, you know, they do tend to deteriorate a little bit, but we're talking quite a substantial amount of years. And if you generally tend to get any issues, it's not necessarily in the structure of the bladder at all, it's at the ends, either with the valve itself or the bladder. But more often than not, we don't tend to get many issues with them, and like I said, you can get spare parts through us if need be. Hypothetically, let's say we have an issue with this beam here, one right in the middle. The joys of it is we let that down. So we've got a leak in that beam. It's better to have a leak in the middle beam that is in the ends. Main reason being is the front two and the back two or back one can support the fabric and still make it usable. So even though essentially the tent is obviously it's a bit flat there, it still allows you to be inside there, keep all your stuff clean and dry, and tackle the issue as and when you need to. What we'll do as well, so hypothetically, if say the front beam went down, there's a good chance, or if not, the front beams could be the same size as the center or the middle or even the back beam. So what you could do is just remove the one in the middle, so either 1, 2 or 3, replace it into the front one if it's the same length. That way, yet again, your tent can stand up as we see here, and you just tackle the bladder, which is the issue. What we'll do now is we'll take a little look inside, look at the actual beam and sleeve, and get a bit more familiar with what part you're unzipping and what part you're doing. So let's head on inside. So now we're inside the tent, we can actually see, to be fair, even with that beam deflated because it's in the middle, you've still got usable space. I mean, I'm quite tall, but even I can sort of happily manage inside of here, not have to worry about your furniture or anything else getting done. And that's the joy of just replacing it from the front or the back and making sure it's the middle one's the issue. Generally, spare tubes don't actually have to be the same length as what you're going in. They can be a little bit longer, as long as the valve position's in the right way. It's just folding the valve up, the end up from the other side, which again we'll show you in just a moment. Now the concept of there is the fact that you've got sort of like a sleeve that sits in the tent, the outer case and the inner bladder, which we talked about. So this looks like on the inside here, a little Velcro part with a zip runner. The zip runner generally is just normally to keep the main outer sleeve inside the tube itself. So as you can see there, that point there, that's just containing the inside there is the bladder and the casing is the grey thing you see. So all that does, it keeps it in place. It means when you take the tent up and down, it stays in the same location. What you normally find is on that little grey bladder, there's a single zip, which has 2 runners. So the 2 runners are normally cable tied together. Now this stops the internal bladder coming out of the actual casing itself, which we'll go through in just a moment. Generally, what you find with the actual bladder, as you see it's deflated here, always remove the tube itself when it's deflated. So where it goes for the actual sleeve or the actual bladder, clear bladder, just makes it more easier and it's safer. It doesn't matter that the casing itself holds the main sort of bladder in place. So if the bladder was not cable tied together or the zips are parted, generally the bladder tries to come out. It's just designed that it kind of retains its shape. The Velcro on the bottom of the zip just stops the zip runner from going up, and then you can just happily undo the zip, and because it's deflated, again, it just flops out like so. Now, you usually have Velcro located on the bottom of the foot to hold it in place when you pack it away, and that's the same for both sides. So I can just unvelcro it, comes off quite nice and easily. Then you can either do repair or replace the inner tube in this side of the sleeve, inside the tent if it's a bit of a wet day, as long as you've got enough room. Alternatively, I'm going to take it outside where there's a bit more room, it's a bit easier to do. What you also find is there's a Velcro part around the valve, just to hold the valve in the correct position yet again when it's deflated. So you might have to peel that off, and if need be, on the Vango models, just bring the cap forward. So now that's completely removed, you can still see the tent's still usable. So what we'll do is we'll take this outside where we've got a bit more comfort room, open it up and just remove the internal bladder. So let's head on out. So now outside, you can see yet again plenty of space to run with it. One thing I will do is just go spread this out a little bit and locate where the valve is. So the valve's there. Now, I like to personally make sure that zip is facing up all the way. So you can just literally untangle it, make sure you got all the way through. Perfect. So now I want to locate where those double zips are. Like I said, these are cable tied together. So you want a pair of scissors or a knife or something just to open that up. Obviously being careful not to damage the actual outer shell, just in case something goes wrong. There you go, that's off, that goes. Collect that. So then what you can then do is just merely open that zip up. Personally, I like to put my finger behind the zip just to make sure it's all okay. And then just open it up like so. You will notice there's not actually like a bit of cord or anything on the zip, just because it's not really designed to be open and closed. It's just, yet again, also when it's going to sit inside the actual tent, it's going to cause a bit of a ridge. That's why the cable ties are quite handy, you just sort of snip them off. So, there you go. So that's a clear bladder you have inside of it. Now, the valve, like again, you might have to push the valve actually through. This one is a Vango air beam speed system, so it's a little bit different to others, but the same concept in terms of the parts. Now what I'm going to do is just remove this part completely. So that's the bit that's going down. So I can either stick that in some water just to find out where the issue is. Alternatively, yet again, just remove that completely and replace it. So what I'm going to do now, you've got pre-packed sort of beams we do south like Vango, and same with Camper and Attwoolls. And yet again, it just comes like this. Generally, you want to carry a little, a little cable tie just in case there isn't one supplied with the actual pack. It does vary between certain sizes and manufacturers. But what we'll do now is even though I know that's good, we'll leave it there for the time being. We'll get the new bladder out. And we'll unravel it. So, there's cable tie in there, perfect. So, normally what you want to find is locate where the valve is first. That's the first point you want to make sure it goes in place. So, on these, that's fine. Open that up a bit more. Generally, it doesn't matter if the actual beam's big, like I said, longer than it needs to be. As long as it's the right diameter and the valve's in the correct location, it's fine. Vango did go to a point where they changed their beam valves back in about 2014. So going forward, they're now supplying a new valve, but actually welding the beams in the correct location. So you can contact us for old beams if you want to as well. So what we're going to do now is just make sure, get the valve in position first. This one end tends to be fixed, so where the valve actually is always fixed. So you want to make sure that is done first. And like I said, the other end, if it's a bit longer, you just merely roll it up. It's not a big issue. So that's gone through there. What I want to do now is lay flat that beam inside the sleeve. That's all it really is, just a sleeve. What you might have to do is just tuck it or fold it on the end, just to make sure it's all nicely back there. And because I know this end's fixed, what I'm going to do, now it's pushed in, is just do that zip up, just so it's about the same level where the valve is. Now we're going to make sure that the rest of the tube's going to sit just in the sleeve. So it's only going to sit in there a little bit. So I'll just move some guy ropes, make it a bit easier with a flat surface. You want that? One thing I probably would give yourself as well is a little bit more extra room than you think you need, especially when it comes to you know, on the campsite. Inside, like I said, you can do it inside, but it does make it a lot easier if you're outside and can sort of spread out a bit more. So initially, we look like we're not going to have too much extra. Actually, it's not a bad replacement beam. I know some manufacturers will put special part numbers on their beams, so you can quite happily just order it as and when you need to. Also, order it as a spare. I know Vanguard themselves put like an ATT number, and in the little window of the tent bag, in there is all the information about the actual beams as well. Now I've laid it out flat. One thing I will probably do in a second is where you've got, say, an arc as it comes up over here. Sometimes you need a little bit more extra bladder in that sort of space. So I'll just give myself a little bit more, only a smidge. You can alter this when you do this in a second. Yeah, nice little arc there, just a little bit more room. Now the ends. Traditionally, a lot of the manufacturers will have a little webbing strap just pre-stitched in there. Now what it does allow you is just to push any excess through the little webbing strap and out the other side. Yeah, again, just it sort of holds it in place. If it hasn't got it, it's not a big drama. You can just literally just sort of fold it and kind of leave it in position. So what we're going to do now is, now it's actually physically open, the valve end is kind of sealed. We're going to get our pump and just put a little bit of pressure into it, just so the internal bladder kind of forms a shape. So don't go sort of gun-ho, just put a bit of pressure in, and you can kind of see as it sort of goes through. So you want it still kind of soft to feel, but the ability you can kind of move it as you want to. So what I'm going to do now is, because that's a fixed end, we know this end's good, I'm going to start from this end and almost kind of slightly push the tube back towards that way, just making sure there's plenty of tension in it as well. As doing so, just yet again, zipping the actual runner upwards. But again, of course, by putting a finger behind the zip, just make sure you're not going to catch the actual tube itself. This process, you can obviously do it. If you do it once and don't find actually it sort of sits right, it's something that can be easily altered. And like I say, it doesn't matter really how long you've got excess on the beam, you just fold it over. So even if it's a ½ meter or so, it's still quite good, which means when you've got a tent like this where the front beams are different lengths to the back beams, it means you can buy a middle beam and fold it over to work on the back. So you don't have to worry about going kind of too big. Generally, as you can see, even though the tube itself is kind of straight, the sleeve tends to be a bit more arced. And so when you've got the corners, just put a little bit more extra in there, just to kind of get around nicely. And actually, that is a nice fit. At this point here, you might have to adjust the back parts, just to sort of either fold it up a little bit more, just to get that length about right. And just obviously push it down firm against the other side like so, and bring that zip back a little bit. That looks okay. Now what I'm going to do is move the 2 zip runners to the middle, just so it sort of doesn't put any more strain on one than the other. And now those zips are done up, very carefully I'm going to increase the pressure, just to make sure as the pressure increases, the beam itself sits and looks fine. You will find the beam probably twitch a little bit to create its shape a bit more. And that's 7 psi there. So I just detach that. You're looking really for any sort of wrinkle marks or a point where you've got a little bit of sag edge or extra beam tension, but generally that looks really quite easy and smart. So that's perfect. What I'm going to do now is just happily get my little cable tie, just re-cable tie that to going through both zip ends. I'm going to flip that over and show you a bit easier. Whoop. Watch out, budgie. No, caught on my ropes now. So yeah, we'll just go through the cable tie, through both zips, and then zip that through. So that is now, pull it tight, just so the zip parts can't pull at all. And what I do is just cut the excess off. So either with a pair of scissors or a pair of knife, quite carefully, just trim that off, and then you've got your beam as well. So what you can probably do actually is either leave it inflated, take it into tent, and then just slot it in. I find that much easier. You might want to take a little bit of pressure out, but we'll do that as we head inside. So off we go. So now we're in. What we can do, the most important part is normally one of the ends actually in the actual zip compartment doesn't open off. Really, it's where the zip sort of finishes on that side. It's sealed, so you have to actually just feed the bottom part of the beam through the sleeve, like so, and then down onto the Velcro part, like that. You can, like I said, on the outside, take a bit of pressure out the beam, just to allow it a bit easier to fit it in. Sometimes with there's too much sort of air in the tube, well to normal PSI anyway, it becomes a little bit more hard to manipulate. So now that base is kind of where I want it to be. I'm just going to kind of push that inside that zip chamber, and then just marry up the Velcro pad on the bottom here. So let's take a bit of air out. Only a little bit, just allow a bit more flexibility like so. So let's get that Velcro point married up. And then also get the valve lined up with the Velcro. Now, by having it, taking a bit more pressure out now it's kind of in place, it gives you a bit more ability to sort of shift it in the sleeve a little bit more. If we get that valve nice and lined up first, perfect. What I can then do, now you see it's a bit kinked at the top here, is just kind of shift it a little bit so it sits a bit neater. I wouldn't zip it up just yet. I'm going to quickly nip outside, just increase the pressure in the tube so it's in the correct place. And then again, I can sort of twist or move the sleeve as accordingly to make sure that it's sitting in shape and looks as it needs to be. So let's quickly go do that. So you've probably seen me just here. Just going to check out the valves, obviously in the right situation from the outside, which needs a little bit of tweaking, but that's okay. And then again, just pump it up to pressure now. So we're rocking 7 PSI. Just connect it. And give it kind of a check internally and externally to make sure it's sitting as it should do. Once you're kind of happy with it, which to be honest, I am, we'll just zip the sleeve back up. And the job's a good one. What you find if you've not put it back straight, there might be a bit more, the beam might be bowing out a little bit on the side. That's basically down to the fact that the sleeve is not in the correct situation in the actual tent itself. So we've got a separate video to sort of tweak and turn that as a when to, but by following that process, it's very easy to do so. But let us know what you think. Of course, any more information you need, do feel free to see the link below to our website, which shows you all of the optional spare tubes that we carry. And of course, any questions, by all means, just let us know. But that, in essence, it may sound a bit hard or may seem a bit hard, but it's actually quite a simple concept and something, yet again, that if you're away, it's easy to deal with. And certainly with service centres around the UK, you can get that result and make sure that you don't spoil your holiday when you need to be. Yet again, with any sort of tent, essentially, I would always say a practice pitch before you go away. Doesn't matter how long you've had the tent, just because where it's been in storage, there may be an issue that happened or rats or something to it. So yeah, again, it's relying on not ruining your holiday. But any more information, check the links below. Thank you for watching, and hopefully it's been helpful.